This is MJ. I'm an author, I'm an artist, I'm an analyzer. Welcome to Fortress Fiction, episode 12. Join me as I talk about The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, written or published at least in 1908. In this book, we see the adventures of a riverbank community of animals, including mole, rat, and toad. I guess Badger didn't make it into this AI-generated thing because he doesn't technically live on the riverbank, but that's okay. So, question: does this book belong in a place of honor in the Fortress Fiction? My answer is a firm no, but more about that later. First, I'm going to tell you how you can read this book if you want to investigate it yourself. This book can be borrowed free from Cloud Library. You can obtain it, again, free from Project Gutenberg, the text file of it, and LibriVox for an audiobook version of it. Your local library, you can also get it free there, and then you can purchase it from the publisher's website and many other online retailers, including audiobook format, or in audiobook format, from Kobo and Audible. So other works by the author, which my inclusion of these here is not an endorsement of the author or these other books. It's just letting you know if you like this and you want to investigate more of what the author is like or what more of the author's works are, you can look here and find them. So in 1894, he published Pagan Papers. In 1895, he published The Golden Age. In 1898, he published The Headswoman. Dreamy Days came in 1898, which includes a story called The Reluctant Dragon. And The Wind of the Willows was published in 1908, a long time later. That's a very interesting span of years. So, I have the bibliography sourced in the show notes, which you can find over on mjmunoz.com. And now as for the qualities of this book, I'll go ahead and talk about it. I made a few notes here to discuss. So, Toad is quite the scamp, though he may be headed toward reform at the end of the book, perhaps. And probably Toad, Mr. Toad, is my biggest problem with this book. He's maybe... So, first of all, or not first of all, an amendment real quick. This book is strange in that it takes place in a world where animals are capable of speech in human society. They're capable of driving carriages, leading horses, harnessing them, driving automobiles, passing as washerwomen, as Toad does in the book at some point. I looked into picture books of this, illustrated books, because the original book is illustrated, or had illustrations very early on, I should say. And there's a range of approaches to the illustrations that are made. In some illustrations, the animals are rather large, very close to human size. In others, they are very diminutive, realistic size, you would say. And others range in between. So it's a little hard to identify exactly what's going on here. And it sounds even at some point like there's an area, a place, I believe it's I can't remember which location it is actually at this point. But it sounds like, I guess Mr. Toad's Hall was begun, or is it Badger's Home? I think it's Badger's Home, actually, was something begun by people, and then there was war or some sort of unrest, and people left, and then Badger came into it and added to it and finished it. I believe it was Badger's Hole, or his dwelling, and I couldn't tell if people was being used of animals as it had been used previously in the book, I believe, or if it was being used of humans. And the problem with these anthropomorphic animals is that they have they're anthropomorphic. They are basically humans. But when you mix them into a world of actual humans, then it muddies the water and makes things difficult to understand. So that's something to understand for you, to know the full context of this book. And also, I would say, I don't remember when Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and whatever was made. It was before this book in time, for sure. I don't remember how many years it preceded it, but there's a bit of I was going to say the folly of Alice. There's a little bit of the absurdity of Alice in Wonderland in this book, and a little bit of like the joking and playing with language and parlor humor, I think is the phrase that they used in the biography that I read, the extra information, like the extra features for the Alice in Wonderland book. And that's interesting. A little more entertaining in this, and definitely this had a much stronger narrative and more of a focused story, but still it feels like an adventure, and it feels like it's a little random, a little being made up on the fly. So those are kind of some issues I have. But getting back to Mr. Toad, um, he is definitely an amoral figure. At the end, towards the end, he is being wronged by certain individuals, and he performs a recovery, a raid, I don't know what you would call it. And I feel like he's in the right for doing that. But all of his other actions throughout the story are quite either immoral or they're morally in the gray. And I find it very curious. And there are little comments in there, comments thrown in the book about like almost like criminal justice reform and how there's a train operator in there who doesn't want to be bossed around by police on his own train. He wants to be left to do what he wants to do, or left to conduct his train as it's a pun, conduct his train as he sees fit. And there's some interesting ideas about like personal responsibility and freedom and things like that. But it's all handled in such an absurdist way, and all the crimes of Mr. Toad, for example, are hand waved away so that it's not an effective statement. It's not a meaningful statement that's being made. It's just kind of something thrown in there. And I'm not quite sure why it was thrown in there. Maybe for the adults who are reading these books or this story or this, the stories in this book to children. I'm not sure. So Mole Rat and Badger are much better in terms of character, and yet they are as delightful as Toad, if not more so. So you would think that if they're not cads and, tricksters, that they would be less entertaining as characters. But there's a sweetness to them. There's a serious to them. There's a bravery and a courage. They help each other out of jams, let's say, and they help Mr. Toad out of trouble as well. And honestly, they're the ones who are trying to reform him. And in their efforts to reform him, they have a camaraderie and a fellowship and an understanding and like a very good stance that they take. And here you may criticize me for, being schoolmarmish or wanting there to be a moral to everything. And while that's somewhat true, I definitely like rebellious, independent, strong characters who are willing to buck the system when they have to and do things that are not considered proper or things that are not legal because they're moral and they're right. But Mr. Toad he's just like a criminal, really. And he's their friend. And yeah, they're kind of complicit in a way because they're letting him do these things. But they try to stop him. They try to intervene and they try to make him a better person, try to reform him, person. See, not Toad, person. And like I said, it may not work in the end. So that's interesting. But they are very interesting characters, very compelling. I like their relationships with each other. Mole starts out very meek. The river rat that he meets, who they just calls Rat or Ratty, is an interesting character. And Badger's he's like a more experienced person who has been through a lot, and he's trying to teach Mole to be more than he is now. And Badger is a mature mentor figure, and he's proud of a lot of Mole's actions, and he really he recognizes him for growing so much throughout the course of the narrative, and he kind of disrespects Toad for failing to grow, and he helps to push his growth and his reformation. So it's really interesting. Let's see. Like I said before, the narrative is a bit meandering. There were some points at which I was listening to the book, and I thought, how did we get here? What's going on here? I don't quite understand. And that's probably a lack of attention to some extent, I'll be honest, but also the first half of the book, the first 3 or so hours of it, were really good and really kept my attention. And as it went on, and I realized that Toad was who he was and that the narrative was fairly okay with him being that way. I mean, you can argue that it's not because he gets thrown in jail and things like that. I became a little less invested and a little, I don't know, more frustrated or something with his character. And it was a little bit, I don't know, harder to stick with Toad. I definitely found everybody else's story more compelling. And the parts of the story where it focused on them was much more enjoyable. So that's interesting. I think there's a better book in there, but or at least one better suited to my taste, but it isn't quite there as is, and therefore that's why I'm kind of poo-pooing it. This is interesting to me. This book is reported to be a favorite of J.R.R. Tolkien of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and while I can believe it given its charm and its literary flair, I do find it somewhat surprising because Toad's so immoral, and I would figure, I don't know, was it a favorite book of his when he was a kid, or was it a favorite of his when he was an adult? There are some interesting elements of fairy in here, though, that are inexplicable, and the readers get to know about them, and then they're, after the fact, they're de facto dramatically ironic because the two characters who interface with the fairy are made to forget it, and it's really interesting. And it's a really interesting passage. It's very beautifully written. There's a lot of literary merit to this as far as how it's written and how the story is constructed, or I guess how the prose is constructed, whether or not the story holds as strong as the prose. I think I'll say this: the prose is stronger than the story, and the story is stronger than the morals. Yes, the morality is the weakest. The story is stronger than that, and the prose is stronger than both of them. Anyway, as an aside, or going down on a Tolkien tangent real quick, there are a lot of hobbitish elements in the book, as well as something that feels like the Scouring of the Shire. And I'm not giving anything away. If you start the book in chapter 1, you'll see things that are hobbitish. And if you've read Lord of the Rings and you know what the Scouring of the Shire is, then you'll understand what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, it's something to look forward to, and it's a fantastic part of Return of the King. So don't start the books thinking you'll get it right away. It's definitely at the end, but it's something really cool, and it's a thing I love in Lord of the Rings. One of my favorite things in Lord of the Rings, actually, and there's a taste of it here, which is really interesting. Overall, I enjoyed this book, but I would not immediately recommend it to young children. I would be comfortable suggesting it to a young teen, and adults with a taste for whimsy will likely enjoy it. I had a few outbursts of laughter while listening to the book, and it was overall very enjoyable. There's just some things that dragged for me, especially with Toad, who I didn't like. Although Toad did give me a few laughs, so it just goes to show that's how it is sometimes. And overall, I did enjoy the book. It's not a part of the Fortress fiction. It's not a fundamental part of it. And that's all I have to say for now. Until next time, take care, be well, keep reading.
I hope you enjoyed that. Go to mjmunoz.com to leave any questions, comments, or other feedback you might have. There you can find all of my analysis, art, and fiction. I cover books, tokusatsu, comic books, anime, and more. Look around. You're sure to find something else that you'll enjoy as well. This has been a Story Over Everything production.